The Port Shepstone cocaine files, the theft that started long before the break-in. At first glance, the Port Shepstone matter appears to be a simple theft case. A large cocaine seizure is made. Months later, the cocaine grows legs and disappears. The obvious question becomes, who stole the cocaine? But the Madlanga hearings have unfolded. A different story has begun to emerge. Please be patient with me because this has led me to my weekend rant. And it's a long time since I last had a weekend rant. And the Port Shepstone and the Gavins got me there. The evidence is increasingly revealing not only a cocaine theft, but a complex web of relationships, transfers, promotions, investigations, suspicions, clearances, and competing loyalties inside the specialized policing environment commonly known as the hooks. The cocaine may be the exhibit, but the people behind this cocaine disappearance are the evidence. Please grab your cup of coffee. Rooibos tea is my favorite because we're going to do this in chapters. Chapter 1, The Man Who Came Back. One of the central figures in the story is Gavin Jacob. Before the Port Shepstone cocaine seizure, Jacob's career had already experienced a significant disruption. In 2018, he was removed from SANEB following allegations investigated by IPID. The investigations reportedly centered on claims that Jacob maintained a relationship with Kevin Cheesy Prism and that the investigations involving the Phoenix Bloods gang may have been compromised because of his relationship with Kevin Cheesy. The allegations were serious. For an experienced narcotics investigator, removal from SANEB represents more than an administrative transfer. It is the loss of trust, loss of position, loss of standing. Miraculously, in June 2019, IPID reportedly cleared Jacob. No evidence was found to sustain the allegations. The investigation ended and his exile from SANEB also ended. Chapter 2, The New Command. In August 2020, Major General Lesetja Senona became the provincial head of DPCI in KZN. Soon afterwards, Jacob returned to the organized crimes and narcotics environment. The timeline is important because in 2018, Jacob was removed. 2019, he was cleared. 2020, Senona arrives in KZN within this same month, Jacob returns. In less than a year later, Jacob would lead the most significant cocaine seizures in KZN history. Whether those events were connected remains unknown, but the sequence is impossible to ignore. And this is what led me to my weekend rant. The other drug cop. While Jacob was rebuilding his career, another narcotics investigator was already deeply embedded in the major drug investigations. His name is Warrant Officer Karl Roland Sander. Like Jacob, Sander's trajectory appears very different. His testimony at the Madlanga Commission evidence repeatedly placed him at the center of major narcotics operations. Warrant Officer Sanders' name appears in these major Durban Harbour busts. In February 2020, there was a Sipingo seizure with 547 drugs. That was Sanders. In June 2021, Port Shepstone cocaine bust. That is Gavin Jacob. In July 2021, there was another, almost like a month later, a Durban Harbour cocaine with almost a ton of cocaine. That was Karl Sanders. Same year, in November 2021, the Port Shepstone drugs, they grow legs. I'm going to leave it there. Yet, despite this experience, Sander remained a warrant officer. Year after year, bust after bust, operation after operation, the contrast between his experience and his rank becomes one of the recurring themes in the evidence. And this is another reason that has led me to my weekend rant. The team. On 22 June 2021, the operation that would define the Madlanga Commission work began. 541 kgs of cocaine was seized. The team included Gavin Jacob, GoodEnough Sibiya, Brigadier Muswa, Major General Senona. As the commission later explored the operation, questions emerged about how the team was structured. Sander was a specialist narcotics investigator. GoodEnough Smear came from a different operational background that has nothing to do with narcotics. The commission has not concluded that any selection decision was improper, but the evidence leaves open questions about why particular individuals were involved and how responsibilities were allocated. The first questions. The cocaine was seized. The celebration was immediate. The questions came later. Why Port Shepstone? Why not Isipingo? Why was the cocaine not stored in a more secure facility? Why were there documentation inconsistencies? Why were chain of custody procedures vulnerable? Why were the critical decisions made the way they were made? Why wasn't the national standard that every police officer is supposed to follow not followed? There was a breach of everything, a comedy of errors from the beginning when Jacob decided to clock himself in from holiday all the way to the end when the drugs were stolen. The further the commission looked, the more questions appeared. The cocaine starts growing legs. One of the most powerful themes emerging from the hearing is that the theft may not have started with the break-in. The theft started way long before the break-in. The evidence increasingly points to earlier problems, storage decisions, movement of the crime scene decisions, documentation that is not clear, sampling procedures that were not followed, exhibit handling, security arrangements. By the time the thieves allegedly arrived with power tools, the Madlanga Commission was already examining whether the conditions for the theft had been created months later. The phrase became unavoidable. The theft started long before the break-in. The theft between 6 and 8 November 2021, 500 kilograms, half a ton of cocaine grew legs. One of the largest cocaine losses in the history of South African policing. The theft shocked investigators, but it also triggered a second story, a personnel story. There's people behind. There is a network behind this. The promotion problem. After the cocaine disappeared, careers continued to move. GoodEnough Sibiya was promoted shortly after the cocaine disappeared. Gavin Jacob was promoted to Colonel. The commission has not found these promotions to be improper, but the evidence has been presented that they were connected to the theft. But the timeline raises questions. In most organizations, even the ones that I work in, if a catastrophic operational failure is followed by reviews, accountability process, and scrutiny, something this major in any workplace, somebody has got to lose their jobs. Somebody has to go on the chopping block. No questions asked. Yet the timeline here appears different. The cocaine disappears, but the careers of the people involved in this cocaine bust, they advance. Whether that is a coincidence, normal progression, or something else is a question that leaves this timeline hanging. I don't understand it. If you do, let me know in the comments. The fall of Sander. While some careers advanced, another moved the opposite direction. On 13 February 2024, Warrant Officer Sander was removed from SANEP and reassigned to a provincial support services, a desk job. The allegations against him were serious again. They included claims relating to cocaine theft, the allegations involving the supply of drugs to establishments in Florida Road Entertainment District. Sander denied all these allegations. He found himself under investigation. He was polygraphed. He was removed from the environment in which he had spent all of his career in. The experienced drug investigator became the suspect, the coffee machine. Among stranger details to emerge in the testimony was the appearance of a stolen coffee machine. On its own, the incident appears almost trivial, but within the broader context, it illustrated something important. The atmosphere inside the unit had become toxic. Polygraphs, allegations, investigations, questions, trust appeared increasingly scarce. The coffee machine became a symbol of a workplace where suspicions seemed to spread far beyond the original allegations. By the way, at the time of this recording, Warrant Officer Sanders' fundraising to buy him another coffee machine is almost 600,000 rands. And I have made my contributions. I can confirm that to you guys. And if you have a few bucks to spare, please don't forget to go on the link and contribute towards this coffee machine. But anyway, where were we? The clearance nobody told him about. Then came one of the most remarkable moments in the Madlanga hearings. Warrant Officer Sander testifies that he had ultimately been cleared. The allegations had not been sustained. Yet, according to his evidence, nobody informed him. Years after being removed, years after being investigated, years after being polygraphed, he learned during the commission proceedings that he had been cleared. The implication is extraordinary. A man treated as a suspect had apparently been exonerated without him being told. The shadow of the timeline. When the timelines are placed side by side, a pattern that I could not ignore emerged. Gavin Jacob was removed in 2018, then cleared in 2019, returned in Sandhab in 2020, soon after the new command, General Senona, had arrived. And then after the drug bust that disappeared, Jacob gets promoted. Karl Roland Sander, a major drug bust history under his belt, was removed from doing that, polygraphed, cleared, and then not informed. GoodEnough Sibiya, he was involved in this half-a-ton seizure of cocaine, yet he had no experience with it. None, zero. He came and testified and says he has no experience in drug busts. But soon after the drug bust, he was promoted twice. The commission has not concluded that any of these outcomes were connected, but the comparisons are impossible to ignore, which is the reason why I am ranting. The real story, the Port Shepstone case, may ultimately answer the question, who stole the cocaine? But another question is emerging. How did the system itself operate? Who was trusted? Who was not? Who was rehabilitated? Who was promoted? Who was removed? Who was investigated? Who was protected? Who was forgotten? The cocaine may have disappeared over a single weekend. The conditions that allowed it, they have been developing for years before that. That is why this story is no longer simply about a stolen shipment of cocaine. It's about a system. And systems often reveal themselves not only through what disappears, but through who rises, who falls, who remains standing afterwards. 141 kgs of cocaine are the exhibit. That is a fact. The real case is the network around that stash of cocaine. The power, the trust, the promotions, the transfers, the silence, the selective suspicions. That is the bigger Port Shepstone story. Not only who stole the cocaine, but who the system protected after it vanished. Anyway, enough of my ranting. Enjoy your weekend.